Hello again, folks. If you're watching this material, then you're ready to imbibe on Module 4 of our course materials. Today we're going to be talking about Chapters 17 and 18 of your course textbook in conjunction with special event speeches. Now, of course, there are an array of different kinds of special event speeches, including introductions and eulogies or toasts, but we're going to decide to do our special event speech on something a little bit more practical. We're going to be giving an elevator speech for your next informal presentation. If you've never heard that phrase, elevator speech, before, it's merely a concise, flexible, and rehearsed sales pitch. And it's designed to showcase your talents, experience, and professional interest. The reason that it's called an elevator speech is because you should be able to deliver this speech in approximately 2 or 3 minutes, or the duration of an especially long elevator ride, walk to a parking lot, or even a brief conversation you might have at a social gathering. So you're going to be delivering an elevator speech over your resume. Let's talk a little bit about the details of the assignment. The purpose and audience of this speech is to create, develop, and sharpen your soft or transferable interpersonal skills to succeed in a competitive professional environment. Whether you realize it or not, in just a scant amount of time, most of you are going to be embarking upon careers or professions, and that's going to require not only the hard skills that are obtained from your diploma and degree program courses, but also the transferable skills that are refined and developed in making sure you market or brand yourself in the appropriate way. This is especially true in professional communication settings, where interpersonal communication has increasingly become replaced through electronically mediated conversations. So based on this premise, you're going to develop a brief presentation that showcases your knowledge and talent. You're going to talk about yourself, but from the perspective of a prospective employer or intern. So imagine you've been asked to devise a speech for a potential employer or internship, and then you're going to develop a short speech that highlights your credentials and demonstrates your enthusiasm and credibility as a potential employee. There'll be several class workshops online that will help you refine and develop this speech, and then you'll record and submit a resume that reinforces your presentation's key points and elaborates on your professional potential. So, here's what you need to do. Based upon your choice of purpose and audience, what you're going to do is compose, refine, and rehearse a presentation showcasing your knowledge, experience, and enthusiasm for a potential or particular employer or internship. In other words, you need to select a prospective employer, whether that's your dream job or maybe just a job that you're thinking about applying for in the next few years. You'll use your past experience and professional aspirations as inspiration, and after you've carefully identified your requisite skills, you're going to translate your background into a cogent, concise resume. So, the major component of this assignment is that you'll be creating a resume instead of an outline or an abstract or any other document. And you'll be submitting that in a upload Dropbox, just like you have previous documents for your prior speeches. As you refine the content, you might ask yourself, what are your personal strengths? What adjectives might former employers, co-workers, instructors, or even student peers use to describe your plaudits? And why are you interested in the selected organization? What makes you an ideal fit for their long-term goals? Once you have completed your resume, you'll adapt its salient aspects into a presentation. And it's going to be divided into 3 distinct parts. First, you'll provide a brief introduction of yourself. Pay careful attention to outstanding recognition, awards, honors, accomplishments, etc. Next, provide a summary of your work and other experience that demonstrates your congruence with a selected organization. And finally, conclude the presentation with an ideal action item, or a call to action, an invitation for your receiver. What's your ideal response? Are they going to ask for your number? Do they need to be directed to a LinkedIn account? It doesn't matter what you choose, so long as you follow this overall order. Of course, like all your prior speeches, this particular presentation prompt will be printed and available on our Canvas website in the appropriate module. Like always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me via email. Let's look at the style sheet real quick. Oops, it says 4 to 5 minutes there. That's wrong. It should be 2 to 3 minutes, and speeches that are excessively long or short will be penalized. A resume published in appropriate format and speech conforms to above purpose and audience. Just like always, you can use index cards, and just like always, your presentation must incorporate an audience of no fewer than 4 total spectators. So we're going to be spending the rest of our online lecture and discussion today going over the attributes of a resume and also going over business and professional communication etiquette. So let's dive right in. We're going to start by watching a presentation by Ashwani Bhagat. Ashwani Bhagat is a person that received a master's in business administration. And yet, even with all of that training, she had to endure 32 interviews before landing a job. Luckily for us, Ashwani kept careful notes on her experience and the lessons that she learned along the way. So as you carefully watch the following presentation, I'd like you to identify several consistent challenges that Ashwani experienced during her job interview process.
All that I wanted was a job. Who doesn't get one? Rewinding 10 years ago, in the last leg of my MBA, when all of my classmates were getting placed left, right, and center, all that I wanted was indeed a job. It took me 32 interviews to get my first one. Along that journey, my only companion was this rule book where I kept note of all the stories and their takeaways, and here I am to share a few of them with you. The Monday was here, the first ever job interview. The night before was all but exciting. Preparations were in full swing. Fear of unknown and all that stuff. I kept telling answers to all the possible questions in my head, including questions like, tell me about yourself in 2 lines. First impression is the last impression is what I had in my mind. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. Nervousness, I guess, and I walked out of my hostel gate. And there, I saw my classmates already near the college gate. I ran, but slowly. Just doesn't go together, right? Just to avoid the creases on my dress. When I reached the interview room, they told it was going to be telephonic. I'm not sure whether I was relieved or much more tensed. The phone was on. Alphabetically, I was the first to go. And I told something like this about me. Hi, I'm Ashwini. I believe in working hard and getting best results. My hobbies include reading and writing, and went on to answer all the questions that came my way. I was rejected on basis of how I described myself. How did they know and decide who was I in just 2 lines? The second time, this one was going to be precious. After super rigorous screening by college, 7 of us were selected for this job, seeking for an HR executive. I was all set to crack it this time. I prepared well, got up in the morning with a super positive attitude, searched my whole cupboard, picked up this beautiful green dress. By then I understood the importance of professional attire. Looked up in the mirror, and I was all set to go. The only thing that was there in my mind when I sat in the college bus was this final round of interview. All of them were taking too long a time to come out. When I went in, the time went by in a jiffy. When I came out, I thought this was the best interview, and I declared myself selected. After 2 days, when the results were out, I was not selected, but my best friend was. When she joined the organization the other day, she told me the reason I was not selected was because of the green dress I wore. Just cannot forget that color, kept out of it for a long time. Did not exhibit the confidence that it had to, and they thought I would not fit the bill. I was like, should it be me or my dress? Whatever. That day, my rule book knew that I had to create a brand called Ashwini. This merry-go-round of interviews was on, and I believed I was getting an expert at this just to be proved otherwise. All of us who had not got jobs at that point of time were trying to grab the next one, and so was this one. The third time, a big hospital chain it was. And since there were 10 of us, they decided to conduct a group discussion. I just prayed for the topic to be familiar, and oh yes, it was something related to politics at that point of time. And all of us rambled to get our points heard. To my surprise, or no surprise, I did not make it to the list. Mind you, there were just 2 of us who did not make it to the list on basis of unable to speak in front of 10 others. Today, I guess, we have 300 of us here. My rule book got richer with done and not to be done for myself. The 4th time around, it was a Friday evening, and I got a call from this organization stating that they liked my resume and wanted me to meet the Monday morning. It was 8 a.m., and all that I saw was the security and the interviewer. And after some initial rounds of questioning, he said he was impressed with me. Finally, I said. It was 9:30 a.m., and the office was buzzing with activity. And they took me to this attic and handed over a broom and a bucket and asked me to clean this attic. The only respite I had was this other girl who was doing the same job. And from her, I got to know that this would be my job until they found someone to replace me. I sneaked out from that place during lunchtime. Not because I didn't want to clean the place, but the role was that of a HR recruiter, and cleaning was no way close to it. This time, the 5th time, I had to travel cities to reach the place of interview after interviewing with almost everybody in this hotel unit. The wait seemed eternally long, and after I waited for some more time, we were called in for the interview. They asked, and I answered. They asked, and I answered. All was fantastic. Some more waiting, and then they congratulated us for this amazing interview that we gave, and told they thought a male would suit this position a little better. I felt like screaming at the top of my voice. But a long silence before I even realized what was just told to me. The icing on the cake was this one of my last interviews, where we were called on a Monday morning and asked to stand like in an army parade, and this group leader took us all around the city. In the interim, I figured out we were marketing some product. No clue what they were. And the evening ended by them telling me that I did not suit a marketing job. I was like, oh yes, you're right. I came in for a HR role, and perhaps that's what my resume told too. When I cracked my 33rd interview, a job seeking for a management trainee HR, I felt liberated and overwhelmed with emotions. When I think of me at work today, the lessons from this rule book has enabled me to make every conversation, job, mine, and that difference is what I call a brand. To do the best in any situation. To understand persistence, and persistence is that one thing which will keep me calm under any circumstances. A time in life that I hated the most and wished to be erased has had some of the biggest learnings for me and has made me what I am today, a seasoned professional with lots of expertise and accolades. Thank you.
A green dress, not being a man, or describing herself in an inappropriate way. All of these seem like strange ways to be rejected, but if you look at the green, yellow, and purple parts of this pie chart, They say things like lack of etiquette, poor communication, and little understanding of the organization account for more than 50% of the reasons why candidates are rejected for jobs. So what all of these things have in common? Well, because they could literally refer to anything. We could put green dress and proper etiquette, not describing yourself in the right way, communication, understanding of the organization. You couldn't be a man. So that means that personnel involved with HR, supervisors, and managers can sometimes choose any reason, regardless of how arbitrary, for not selecting you for a career or a profession that you are otherwise well qualified for. There is one silver lining in Ashwani Bhagat's presentation. She talks about learning that every conversation that she has needs to be business-minded, and that she began to think of herself as a brand and not just a job candidate. So learning to brand yourself, to market yourself, and to understand that every conversation that you have could impact your profession or career is a vital part of special interest communication, speaking, and career-mindedness. Just imagine, you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, and somebody at the counter asks you, "Are you married or unmarried?" The context of that conversation means they just need to check off a box before they give you your driver's license. Now imagine that you're at a club or a bar. You're sitting on a stool and then someone comes up to you and asks, "Are you married or not?" Obviously, where you are completely changes the context of that question. In the same respect, a simple question like, "What are your interests or hobbies?" could mean something very specific in a job interview. It might surprise you to know that there are a lot of people that work as hedge fund managers for Bear Stearns on Wall Street that don't have a degree in either business or accounting, but a lot of them have competitive athletics listed among their hobbies. Why? Because it's believed that if you work on Wall Street, you're going to have to be extremely competitive in order to buy and sell at a rate that's commensurate with Bear Stearns standards. So every conversation that you have and every aspect of that conversation is a part of your brand. Understanding that, we're going to talk about how to start branding you. That's building an effective resume. Most of your work experience up to this point might have involved just filling out applications, either online or in person on paper. But a resume allows you to control the conversation about what you have to offer a corporation or organization. And that begins with a header, or appropriate communication, including your name, your permanent or perhaps your present address if you're living in on-campus housing, for example, an email address, which should be a very simple email address, just your first and your last name at Gmail or Yahoo, and then a telephone number. Let me footnote that email address. Make sure it's an email address that you start today, and that you attach and send all of your most important documents to, including copies of your tax forms, a copy or a scan of your Social Security card, and your resume itself. Why is that? Because let's say your life turns into an utter shambles. You lose your home, your car burns down, your laptop burns up. That means if you have that email address with all those very important documents, including things like scholarship information, PIN numbers, etc., you're never more than one Wi-Fi connection away from restarting your entire life. Hopefully that'll never happen to you, but if something similar has already happened to you, you know how important it is to be able to jump into overdrive and rekindle all of your connections and know all of your important data. Also include a purpose or objective statement. This is where you deliberately state your desire for a particular position. Here are just a few examples. Management trainee position with a specialty retailer. Great, you want to be an assistant manager at Hot Topic. Or technical sales with an energy-related industry in the Southwest. Long-range goals of regional sales management. So they want to work for the petroleum industry, but they don't want to work on an oil field. And notice, long-range goals of regional sales management states that they're willing to move if they get a promotion. In other words, they're controlling the conversation about who they are and what they want from the jump. After that, you're going to list your education. Now, for many of us, our education currently doesn't stretch beyond a high school diploma. But even in that case, you'll name the institution, include the city and state if it's not a part of the title, and then, if you do eventually get an associate's degree, you're going to name the degree and major. I got an Associate's of Science in Net Security or Business Administration, an Associate's of Art in Photography, and then list the degrees in reverse chronological order with your most recent degree first. After that, the most important part of your resume is your experience. This is where you list all of your full and part-time jobs. And then, you want to include things like volunteer work or even self-employment. One of the reasons that you want to do that is so there won't be any gaps in your resume from the time that you started work to your current occupation. Even if all you did for a year was open an Etsy store or do some volunteer work for a local religious organization while you were, for example, staying home with your children or looking for more long-term employment, it's important not to have as few gaps on your record as possible. So what do you list under your experience? Begin by listing your job title. Sometimes this means you'll have to make up your own job title if you worked for a small organization in which you had to do a variety of tasks in your occupation. Dates of employment are also important. Especially concentrate on the month and the year. Sometimes the day isn't as important. So, for example, I worked at the post office from April of 2013 to May of 2018. The company name, and make sure you list the company's name while you worked there, especially if that company name has changed since then, the city and the state, and the responsibilities. We'll talk about responsibilities in just a moment, but essentially it's about 2 or 3 bullet points of information about the things that you did on a daily, weekly, or sometimes a monthly basis in that position. Of course, you'll also want to list honors and awards, again by reverse chronological date, and also consider ranking them in order of importance to the career objective. So even though you're especially proud of the fact that you were an Eagle Scout in high school, if, for example, you served in a workshop capacity or you did some volunteer work for which you received an award and which you organized data, if you're going to do clerical work, then that data processing award might be more important than anything that you did in Scouts. So what about those responsibilities? Well, you're going to try to start each line with an action word. So, for example, I processed no fewer than 300 work orders every week. Or, I actuaried no less than 3,000 orders or process orders per calendar year. Try to use present tense if you're currently employed and past tense if you're no longer employed. And try to vary your choice of verbs, or don't use the same verb more than twice in one responsibility. Make sure you tailor your skills and experience to the position which you are applying. It's never a bad idea to keep a master copy of your resume in that email address that I spoke about, with no fewer than 5 responsibilities for each job. Then just select all, copy, and paste that resume into a new document. That document is the resume that you'll be using to apply for a particular position. And just erase or get rid of all of the responsibilities that aren't directly germane to the position you're applying for. Try to be concise while providing enough detail. In other words, try to be exact about numbers, but don't get into too many details because that could overwhelm a particular HR employee. Let's look at an example of maybe some responsibilities that need a little work. Performed internet search. Really all that tells me is this person knows how to use Google, and who doesn't? Organized office file records. How many office files? What kinds of records? Responded to office inquiries. With who? With clients? With other offices? Did they need to know technical language to do that?
Answered a multi-line telephone. Well, anyone can learn how to do that after a few minutes, but who did you speak to, and about what? Let's look at this. Although it's not perfect, you can see it's a little bit better. Assisted with updating employee personnel files. Okay, at least I know what kind of personnel files they used. But it would be good to know how many personnel files they updated on a weekly basis. Screen job applicants. How many, again? And what kinds of job applicants? Observed human resource manager interviewing applicants. Great. How many times a week did you do that? Or maybe even how many times a day? Trained new employees? Participated in interviewing? Open and closed store. Well, what does open and closed store mean? For example, at Abercrombie & Fitch, does it mean that all you have to do is unlock the gate at the mall and then turn on and off the light? Or were you responsible for doing things like processing the amount of sales that were done? Did you have to file any receipts? Did you have to use a safe? All of those things could mean the difference between employment and non-employment for particular positions, and knowing how to brand yourself could be the difference between success and failure. Just at a glance, let's look at these two resumes. On the left, it would seem like information would be a little bit more easy to find, but notice how well organized the one on the right is. Here we see emboldened and all caps. So if I'm an HR manager that's looking for something in particular on this resume, for example, I need to know that they have experience in a fast-paced customer service environment, I can look down and see it right there, Town Marketplace. Or if I just need to know what their GPA is, I know where to look for it. On the left, that becomes a little bit more difficult. In fact, I don't even see, and I'm reading every line to make sure that they even have their GPA listed. I don't know what they did at that Goodwill thrift store, and I don't know what they mean by internet computer skills. Do they mean they've worked with a special database? Or do they mean, again, that they've just used Google? So, again, knowing your audience will help you curate your resume for that audience. So with that in mind, let's review some tips for effective job interview communication. Whenever you go to a job interview, try to dress appropriately for the industry. When in doubt, go conservative. A good rule to follow is to always dress slightly more formal than the everyday tasks of the job. So, for example, if it's a casual work environment, dress in business casual for the interview. If it's a business casual environment, then go formal. Personal grooming and cleanliness should be as impeccable as possible, but try to keep the amount of cologne or perfume you wear to a minimum. You don't know when your HR interviewer is going to have allergy problems, and pay particular attention to hands and fingernails. The reason is because sometimes the manager or supervisor that interviews you might be just as nervous about an interpersonal communication setting, which means they're not going to look in your eyes. Their eyes might instead drift to your hands and fingernails, so making sure those are clean is important. Try to arrive 10 minutes early. In fact, it's not a bad idea to make a recon trip by knowing the exact time and location of your interview. Know how long it takes to get there, park, and find a restroom to freshen up. Remember, it's better to have the time and not need it than need the time and not have it. Treat other people you encounter with courtesy and respect. Believe it or not, their opinions might be solicited during the hiring process. Whenever I've worked in HR capacities, I've always asked administrative assistants, stage managers, or other individuals that had more face time or contact with candidates about the behavior of those individuals whenever they thought I wasn't looking or listening. And then respond to questions and back up your statements with specific examples. So, if people ask you if you've had experience on creative projects, don't just say yes. Tell them about 1 or 2 creative projects that you've worked on, the timeline that it took, and the decisions that you had to make to create the necessary outcomes. If people ask you about whether or not you're good working in a diverse work environment, give them an illustration or example about how you've handled diverse work environments in the past. In other words, evidence everything that you say, support it, so that people won't just remember you said yes to a question, but they'll remember that you were the person that said Y, Z, A, B, or C in relation to that question. With that in mind, and I apologize if some of the language in this next video is a little prurient, this is a presentation by Fast Company. It's going to give some do's and don'ts about answers in job interviews. So as you carefully watch the segment, identify no fewer than several breakdowns in communication based on the differential between audience demography and the sender's messages.
Hi, I am really excited to meet you. I saw on your daughter's blog that she has a gluten allergy, so I got these gluten-free cookies. I hope she likes them. I'm a crazy stalker. Don't let me into your life.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't bring any copies of my resume with me. I actually care so little about this job. I didn't even bother to print something out.
Sorry I'm late to traffic. I just don't care about your time.
They really didn't know how to take advantage of my skills. I have no skills.
My old boss, Tim, do you know him? Oh, I love Tim to death. He didn't really get social media, but gotta love that guy. I'm super passive aggressive, and I'll talk behind your back the first chance I get.
My biggest flaw is that I'm a perfectionist. My biggest flaw is that I am an asshole and a liar.
Well, I'm not good at public speaking, or delegating, or working in Excel, or interviewing for jobs, obviously.
I really don't have any flaws. Yeah, I'm gonna be a lot of fun to manage.
Where will I be in 5 years? In your job. Just kidding. I'm not kidding. Watch your ass.
I want to invent the next Uber. I'm going to use your office to start my own company. Yeah, and then I'm going to steal all your employees, even Brenda.
I mean, honestly, I would just really love to get away from the grind in this business setting. Maybe I'll move to Europe or Africa or Asia or open up an Etsy store, something like that. Yeah, I get high a lot.
What kind of medical insurance do you provide? I have cholera and I want you to pay for it.
What's your vacation policy like? I can't wait to not be at my new job.
Do you think I'll get an office? I want all the things I don't deserve. Sorry, I'm expecting a call. Yeah, so many more things in the world more important than this. Yeah, it's going great. I don't know, I think I got it.
I really want this job. I'm the most desperate person you've ever met, and I'm 5 seconds away from grabbing your hand and begging.
I'm a team player, and I'm a people person. All I have to offer you are cliches.
I'm not really looking right now, but I would consider taking it if the price was right. Yeah, I'm gonna start looking for a job from my desk the second you hire me. Do you know anyone, actually?
All right, folks. Just to wind that up, here are some of the world's worst job interviews. Absent-mindedly twirling my pen around, I got the ends mixed up and drew a fake beard on myself while asking questions. That was the interviewer. But this is the interviewee. My interviewer told me he had just given the job to the previous candidate, so we ended up talking about cancer for 30 minutes. Wow. I collected the candidate from reception. He barked at me, "Coffee, sexy, now where's your boss?" I then sat down to interview him. I panicked when asked for my biggest weakness, told them it was a vague but common feeling of melancholy, got the job. After reading the results of the Myers-Briggs type test I'd just done, the interviewer started by asking me if I was all right. Well, hopefully your job interviews don't go that poorly, but it's important to know just what Ashwani Bhagat reminded us of, that literally everything that you do and say during the interview process is a form of communication. This is one reason why we've already spoken about the fact that in the interview process, and regarding nonverbal communication, everything that we do sends messages. So, with that in mind, there's just a few final things to understand about poor communication during the interview process to evade. Number one, don't make excuses. Take responsibility for your decisions and actions. In other words, if there are any spots or glaring omissions on your resume, explain that you may have made a mistake in the past when it comes to one or more jobs And then describe how you've learned from those processes. Don't make negative comments about previous employers. Just like you saw in the video presentation that we watched, what that says is, I'm going to speak about you behind your back just like I spoke about them behind their back. Don't treat the interview casually, as if you're just shopping around. It's insulting the interviewer and the organization. Honestly, they believe that they merit the best candidates possible, even if it's not true. Showing them that respect could spell the difference between success and failure in your interview. Don't give the impression that you're only interested in salary. Yes, it's true. Most of us take jobs primarily because we need to afford the rent, or mortgage, or car payments, but you shouldn't necessarily say that's the only reason that you're taking a position. Because literally everybody that's interviewing for that job also is interviewing them for a salary or a wage. What you want to describe or what you want to reveal to them is why you're an ideal fit for this organization at this time. And finally, don't act as though you'd take any job or are desperate for employment. Because what that signifies is, just like when you're at a club or a bar and you're willing to, quote-unquote, go home with anyone, is that you have no standards. And probably your interviewer does. Well, that's all for this particular lecture, folks. Hope you've learned a little bit about professional communication, and more importantly, about our upcoming prompt. That assignment will be due in just a few weeks on April the 29th. April the 29th. If you have any questions